Hello everyone and welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. Today we're going to be covering artifacts today. We're going to be talking about how to min-max, what you should be looking for, and I guess what are the best ones that you can get, and also artifacts you can get for beginners, set bonuses, different things like that. So I'm going to try to cover everything that I can about artifacts in this video to help new players, or even if you're a veteran player, teach people new things about artifacts, help them understand, make them help them understand, and get them better at understanding artifacts. I guess, yeah, I said understanding like 10 times, but whatever. All right. Well,
The
anyways,
damned will
if
sooner
you
die
if you do
again
enjoy the
than lay
video,
a
please be
hand
sure
on me.
to like and subscribe because that does help me out a ton, and it can get this video recommended and push it into the algorithm. But yeah, anyways, let's get right into the video. Okay, so first thing I think I want to talk about is for beginners, if you're just starting out on this game, what you're going to be trying to look for artifacts is main stats first. For example, unless it's a flower or a feather, it does main stat doesn't matter because it's always the same. But for your sands, your goblet, and your circlet, you're gonna look for main stats. Your circlet usually, almost all the time, is going to be crit rate or crit damage for DPSs. Unless you're building supports, and some supports you can do HP bonus or HP, or depending on what kind of character you're building. But for the most part, what you're gonna for DPSs at least, which is what you're really gonna be focusing on building until you get to your supports, you're gonna be looking for main stats, and you want crit damage for your circlet. That's usually how it is. For goblet, it's most of the time going to be an elemental damage goblet, which has to correspond with whatever element your character is, or whatever damage you want to do. If you wanted to, I'd say build a physical D-Luke. You wouldn't do that, but like if say you wanted to, you'd put a physical cup on him, because that way you can buff your physical damage, meaning now you're going to be doing a lot more of that specific damage. But technically for D-Luke, you would want to be building Pyro, and he's a Pyro DPS, so you'd go full Pyro damage. You get the Pyro Goblet and stuff like that. Yeah, but that's pretty much it for your characters there. If you have, again, supports, certain supports either take HP or healing bonus or defense. Again, it depends on what character you're using and who you're building. Like Diona here, HP because I wanted to heal, but I could have given her a Cryo Goblet or Benny a Pyro Goblet if I wanted to do more damage. And then Zhongli, I could give him Geo, but I want him to have a stronger shield. That's how I build him. And then Sucrose, most animal characters you build with triple elemental mastery main stat because that's what you use him for the swirling damage and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for goblets. That's the main stats you're going to be kind of looking for, depending on whatever character. For DPSs, it's going to be an elemental damage goblet, comparing to their that corresponds with their element, or a physical damage goblet for certain DPS characters that scale really well with physical damage. For your sands, it's either going to be attack percent or energy recharge for the most part. Elemental Mastery can work for certain characters that do a lot of reaction damage. It's actually really strong if you don't have any Elemental Mastery. But most of the time, you will go attack percent for your DPSs and energy recharge for your supports. And that's pretty much it. Again, Sucrose has EM because, well, she needs to be doing high swirl damage. So for your flower and feather, these are where you're going to really focus on substats, and that's pretty much it. That's all you really do focus on for. That's what they're for. Like this feather here, it rolled pretty well. It had three of these stats that I was looking for, or two of the stats out of the four were what I want: crit rate, crit damage. My fourth roll, I think it started as a 3. My fourth roll rolled into HP, but most of it rolled into crit rate a little bit, and once in crit damage. I could get a better feather, but I'm currently working on other characters, so this is what I have for now. It is going to be kind of tough to upgrade eventually, but this is not that bad. You honestly can get a way better piece than I do if it doesn't roll into defense or HP at all, and just those two rolls hit your crit damage, then you have a way better feather. For your flower, again, for DPSs, it's going to be crit rate and crit damage. That's what you're going to look for substats. You can also look for attack percent, which is also really good. And depending on the character, either energy recharge or elemental mastery. The same thing with the feather, because certain reaction characters you want elemental mastery because it makes them hit harder. And attack percent is always good to have. there are some like niche characters, or not niche, but like there's some certain or flowers or feathers that can work with characters. Like this one is not good. Honestly, Elemental Mastery on Albedo doesn't really work. Just ignore that. But this one that has defense here, now most people will be like, oh, this feather sucks. But for Albedo, because he scales with defense, that defense percent is actually pretty good. It could definitely be way better if that attack percent didn't roll into attack percent, and again, at least once into crit damage and maybe not into flat HP. But that's the problem with artifact rolling. It is what it is. Most of the time, you get trash rolls. RNG is not in your favor. So, but yeah. So for beginners, always focus on main stat until you're closer to end game when you can start farming artifacts, which is like AR45, and then you can start going for your substats. But yeah, for main stats, it's going to be obviously these three here. These you can focus on substats since that's all they're used for. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about set bonuses now. In my opinion, set bonuses when you're early on and you're a beginner don't really matter unless it's a certain sets. It's stronger. I'm pretty sure like Heart of Death, not Heart of Death. I'm pretty sure that Emblem of Severed Faith is actually really good without good substats. It can be pretty strong on certain characters because the 4-piece set is just so strong. And then you also have, I think Heart of Death is pretty good. Like if you don't have decent artifacts, but it does increase your skill damage, or not your skill damage, your normal attack and charge attack. So that's also strong. And I think Shimenawa also is really good. And also for this character, Diluc specifically, the 4-piece Crimson Witch is way better than if you were to get 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Pyro, because you can't build a 4-piece. So you would honestly rather go for the 4-piece set because it's stronger, or the Blitz Destroyer, which you should only be building a 4-piece because the substats don't entirely matter because of the 40% crit rate you get from it in freeze teams. But yeah, those are pretty much it. And also, actually, yeah, the Noblesse set is really good as a 4-piece set on your support because substats don't really matter on your support that much until you're like near end game where you want to min max their energy recharge, their healing, and stuff like that. Mostly their ER because like you want them to get their burst back a lot. So yeah, for the most part, beginners focus on your substats, and yeah, that's after you after you get good main stats and you're like mid game to end game and you start for artifact farming, then you can start going for your substat rules on your really good main stat pieces, that you're looking for. And by that time, you should know what you're looking for certain characters. There's so many build videos out. You should know how to build every character. If you don't, check out my videos. I have a decent amount of guides. I will come out with more eventually. But yeah, so 2-piece, even if you don't have a set bonus, it's okay. It's not as important as having a good crit rate to crit damage ratio. That is very, very important when you're building DPSs or you're trying literally anyone in this game that you want them to do damage. You have to have a good ratio. The optimal ratio is 1 to 2. So for every 1 crit rate, you have 2 crit damage. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but if you haven't, like new players who haven't heard this, that's what you're looking for. Here, I got really, really lucky on my rolls, and I also have a crit rate weapon and Zhao also has an ascension stat that gives crit rate. So I'm definitely getting a really good buff there. So that's why I'm at such a high crit rate and crit damage, because again, too, I also have decent like artifacts, that are helping me out. He also has a 127 energy recharge. Again, got lucky, but you really don't need this much ER with Xiao when you just have a battery and you're fine. And then, yeah, my animo damage. That's not that hard to get. You just run a cup and then you have the 15 bonus. But yeah, so a lot of things that can help you with artifacts is weapons that scale with crit rate and crit damage, or even attack percent weapons. That way, you can get away with not running an attack stance, but I wouldn't recommend it. It depends on the character you're using. Uh, I think we also have. Oh, when you're going into endgame, now is like AR45, like when you're starting your artifact grind, this is where you can start focusing on your substats like heavy, like certain pieces aren't going to get the best rolls or certain pieces are going to be better than others. Like for example, this flower, 20 crit damage, but like 10% crit rate, a little bit ER, it's okay, but if it didn't roll into flat attack, I could have a better piece. For example, this is a good flower, but I think I could have gotten another roll into crit rate. Maybe I don't think so though. I think it rolled once in a crit rate and every time in a crit damage, but this was a three-piece flower because if not, my stats would be higher. You kind of can tell when you play enough whether it rolled into flat attack or flat defense, and it didn't roll into either of those. I think it might have rolled into attack once though, but again, if you're going into endgame, you're going to be focusing on substats, and certain pieces aren't going to be as good as your other ones. Most pieces that you're looking for, you want for DPSs at least, you want crit rate and crit damage on them, and you want them to roll into both of them all the time. That's pretty much it. God rolls for most characters is going to be if you can get this four pieces, the four substats that are crit damage, crit rate, attack percent, and then either energy recharge or elemental mastery. Those are God roll artifacts. You will probably never see them until like years, or not even years, until like months of farming. Like they're really hard to get, and even if you get them, there's no guarantee they roll into crit rate or crit damage even once. They could roll all into elemental mastery or all into attack percent, and you don't want that because even though that piece is decent, like it has those amazing four substats, it didn't roll into the two substats you really wanted them to make it into that god roll artifact. Also, god roll artifacts do have a higher chance of rolling into the stats that you want because, well, all the stats are there that you like, that you need. So, but for example, this attack percent sands, honestly, for mid game or where I'm at, is not that good. But I mean, compared to what I have or what I've been rolling, it's better. It's just you use what you got. Even if they're not the best pieces, sometimes if it has a little bit of crit damage and has your main stat, it's better to keep that for now and then just upgrade later on. My best sands looks to be either this one, which is kind of rolled a lot into crit rate, and it could have rolled one more time into crit damage instead of defense, but again, this is artifact RNG, and that's what happens. Yeah, so if I look, this is also a decent sands. This might be my best sands in my opinion if I'm looking at everything else. It doesn't look like this is also okay. For the most part, I get a lot of pieces that roll a lot to crit damage, so it's a give and take. Sometimes you get what you're looking for, sometimes you don't, and sometimes it rolls all a few times into crit damage, but then no other stat like crit rate that you have on it. It is what it is. Not much you can do about it. One thing I think I can teach you guys is artifact feeding. There's a certain system that you can use is where the artifact system, the XP system, works in a way that you get refunded a certain amount. I think it's like 80% back, and you lose like 20%. So if I got this artifact to level 4, I roll the fourth stat to see what I get. And if I get crit rate, it might be a piece that I keep. However, this one is, I think it is an attack percent. I think. No, this is an HP. I don't know which one I was on. This one, this HP. This is an HP one. The reason I keep some of my HPs is because certain characters are really good with HP sands. For example, Hu Tao, who scales of HP, she's better using HP sands than an attack percent sands. And then you try to get a really good one. So yeah, if you were to roll into these and get 4 levels and it doesn't roll into the stat that you want, like if it's a 3 stat artifact and say it rolls like flat attack on this one, then for me, I personally, either unless I have nothing else, I would get rid of it and feed it into another artifact. So like you could take this level 4, feed it into this one to see what you get for the fourth stat, and you'd get like 3 levels out of it most of the time. I think you lose like 1 level and a little bit of XP. So you get 3 levels out of it, and then you just feed a little bit of artifacts, and that way you save XP and you save some of your resources. Another thing you can do, when I recommend, is when you're farming, is save those god roll save those god roll substat pieces. Like save a few of them. Don't save every single one that is a god roll. I mean, if it really is a god roll, keep it for now. Like even if it's terrible, like you're never gonna like it's an HP Sans that has like 4 stats that you want on a character, but you can't get. So like if it has crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, and elemental mastery, like if this were to roll into that, I save this. I'm gonna still save it because again, Hu Tao's coming out in the next banner, so I'm gonna pull for her and I'm gonna try and get a good HP Sans for her. But anyways, regardless of that, I would say always save those pieces that even though you don't think you're gonna use in the future, just save them because if Mohoyo or whatever ever releases a character that scales with that art or with that stat, You know, there's so many characters that are going to come out in the future. So just save it for now, and then you might be able to use it later. Because if it's a god roll, maybe you get really lucky, and now you have an insane piece to use on them. That's what I recommend, and a lot of people do recommend as well. So yeah, I think I covered your little XP refund you get, and that you should always refund, or you should always feed low level artifacts and test them out. If you have nothing else, you know, get in level 4, see what you get. If it's bad, feed into another one. And that's basically, in a way, kind of like min maxing. Another way I can really completely explain it is where if I have this piece right here, these 4 stats, I could get a better stance. It's possible. I could get it if it didn't roll into flat attack or defense and 2 times into crit damage, then I would arguably have probably one of the best artifacts in the game, you know, for Sans. You can also another example of min maxing is the substat RNG roll. Like when it rolls into crit rate, the max roll you can get is a 3.5, and I think the lowest is like 2.2 or something like that, or 2.8. I'm not exactly sure. I think I know the maximum really more. For like crit damage, the max roll you can get is 7.8. So if you were to get this artifact and it gets 7.8 crit damage, and then you feed it XP and it rolls 7.8, that's also, you know, the max roll. The highest you can get is 7.8. And if you were able to roll into the artifact 5 times, and those 5 times it rolls 7.8, that is what I would call a perfect crit damage roll, because that's the highest number you can get on it. Again, it all comes down to endgame and you min maxing your artifacts, different things like that. This I could get better, so I could min max and try and get the best possible it could be. But again, I'm building other characters, so I'm not really going crazy. I'm just getting what I need and then just being done with it. Another thing I guess you can was once you're so I think I can basically briefly summarize this and say that once you get your main stats that you need, then go for substats. Once you get your substats that you need, I guess you can kind of focus on your 4-piece sets, you know? Like certain characters that need 4-piece sets. Zhao doesn't, but Sucrose, this is a character where it doesn't really matter about your main stats unless Elemental Mastery, and then your substats don't even matter at all, pretty much. Just get as much Elemental Mastery as you can, and then you can just put a 4-piece set and put any artifacts on it. The same thing with him, you kind of need like 3 artifacts that are good, which is his Flower and Feather don't really matter unless you want him to get to most optimal he can be with his defense. Zhongli, like I said, 4-piece set is important on him because it doesn't really matter what stats you need to have on him unless it's HP, because you're building him as a shield bot. That's what I did. But again, it's certain character builds that you do, you know? Like Kaching, she doesn't need a 4-piece set. She can do a double 2-piece set, like 2-piece Thunder Soother, no, 2-piece Thundering Fury, and then 2-piece Glad is fine. You know, so certain characters need either they can be run on a 2-piece set and be perfectly fine, or a 4-piece set is more optimal. Like, for example, Child 4-piece set is really optimal. Same thing with Raiden. And I think I've covered pretty much everything. Like I've explained characters that don't really need don't really need crazy good rolls on them. Like you can run 0 artifacts on them. Like I guess I'll give one example here, just in case if I didn't in the video. Bennett can be run on a 4-piece Noblesse super early on, and he will be cracked. Like he still will have really good healing, and he'll give you a really good huge buff, you know? So that's one of those characters that it doesn't really matter what artifacts you put on him. You can always get him stronger, but a 4-piece Noblesse, you can't go wrong. Even animal characters, a 4-piece Verdescent, you can't go wrong. And I think, yeah, now I think that's pretty much everything. I've covered, you know, min-maxing, your crit damage rolls, you know, certain things that you're looking for. I think I've gotten everything that you could possibly need to know about artifacts and how they work, and, you know, the best way to farm them. Oh, I think I forgot this one thing. For certain domains, you might be better off focusing on one domain, because if that artifact set can be used on multiple different characters, that way it gives you a better chance of getting good artifacts, you know, because I think I'm not entirely sure how it works, but it doesn't mean like I guess I could say is you have a better chance of getting that artifact set great pieces because you're always in there, and those artifacts can be used on multiple different characters, saving you resin rather than doing every single other domain and trying to get the 4-piece set or the certain 2-piece sets on that character specifically. Because then you're focusing on building only one character when you could be doing like the Shimenawa or Evelyn of Severed Fate domain, which is like for a tons of characters in this game. So that way, like I said, that way you're saving resin and you know you're basically doing the most optimal artifact farming that you can do. And if you want to save your time, always use condensed resin. Always never use just always use condensed resin. Always go for it. If you have condensed resin, use it. And yeah, like I said, I think I've covered absolutely everything. So if you guys did enjoy the video and thought it was helpful, like I said in the beginning, please be sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out a ton. And I really, really appreciate you guys for watching and taking the time out of your day to watch this pretty long video. And yeah, I'll see you guys. Peace out.